Hola, it's me, Trashkin.
What's up guys, welcome back to another video. This tier list video has been long awaited, the second anniversary tier list Mewtwo release. Mewtwo is really hype even though it's super overpowered. You can see the here we go again tier. Just like Zacian, they made this legendary uber broken. At least they had an emergency patch, but this tier list is going to be after the emergency patch, and I still think Mewtwo is the best Pokemon, as you can see here in the here we go again tier. Something that has been asked for me so much is for a solo queue tier list. So I have now made a competitive tier list and a solo queue tier list. If you guys really like that idea, make sure to show this video a lot of love, you know, like share, subscribe, like all that jazz. If this video does really well, like better than my other tier list videos, I'll continue to include solo queue tier lists. Without further ado, let's get into it. This is the competitive tier list starting off. So the number one tier is here we go again. Mewtwo is extremely broken. So if you don't know how to categorize these, it's like skill, like how hard the Pokemon is to play versus how broken they are. So some Pokemon are extremely broken, however they might be like really hard to play versus easy to play. At the level Pokemon UI is, I think that makes a huge difference even at the top level. So Mewtwo, not only is it extremely broken, it's very easy to play. That's why it's in like the top tier. Like I don't think anything comes close right now for how easy. Maybe Umbreon, but it's like Mewtwo, Umbreon, and then the rest of the Pokemon for how easy it is to play and how broken it is. We have the unholy defender trinity. So again, this is for competitive, and man, all of these Pokemon are so broken. Umbreon, I mean, I don't need to explain there. They actually buffed the Mean Look Wish moveset, which was probably better in a lot of certain comps in competitive, and they buffed that moveset. So no changes there for competitive for Umbreon. Still the best Pokemon probably in play for Worlds. We're gonna see a lot of Umbreon. It is a must pick. Slowbro is the same thing, a must pick. I don't think a single team will not pick Slowbro. That's how broken this Pokemon is. We will see it as a pick or ban in every single match at Worlds. Lapras, there could be one or two games that we don't see a Lapras, but I highly doubt it. Lapras is just so broken. You can play Lapras in 4 different roles. You can play it top lane, you can play it jungle, you can play it defender, you can play it attacker. This Pokemon is like the most flexible Pokemon in the game, and it was actually a couple tiers down on my previous tier list. It didn't receive any buffs or nerfs. The reason for it being this high up now is because with the introduction of Leafeon, speedsters aren't as high priority in these drafts, because there's 3 really good speedsters now, Leafeon, Dodrio, Zoroark, which we'll get into later. But because of that, you don't really need to prio any of the speedsters. Most likely one of them will be up for you to take if you really need a speedster in your comp. So now that these speedsters aren't as high prio, Pokemon like Lapras are really important, very high priority, because they do things that no other Pokemon can do. For like, you'd have the trade-off with like speedsters, you take them away, and now you can decide between what Lapras can do really well and what speedsters can do really well. But now you'll get the speedsters no matter what, which means what Lapras can do is very valuable because no other Pokemon can fill that role later in the draft. Now we go to S+ tier if Mewtwo didn't exist. So kind of weird that the 3rd tier is S+ tier. Obviously it's Pokemon Unite, so I do think this tier list is pretty accurate with my categories we'll see later on. Next we have Leafeon. Leafeon is now new to competitive. I made a prediction of where I thought Leafeon would be in my last tier list, and I actually had Leafeon a lot lower. I was wrong. Not a lot lower, I still have Leafeon in kind of this tier of broken Pokemon. It is actually uber broken. It deserves to be way up here. Leafeon is so good at steamrolling the early games. It's just the best speedster at it. The reason I was iffy on the Leafeon is because I think it loses the 1v1 to the other speedsters, but that actually hasn't shown to matter that much. Leafeon is just the better speedster into other Pokemon besides those speedsters, and that makes it so broken, especially because its early game is way better than the other speedsters. Zoroark can kind of match and like sometimes outperform. In general, Leafeon's gonna perform better in the early game. Inteleon, this might surprise a lot of people. I don't know if the majority of Pokemon Unite players realize how broken this Pokemon is. It has the best secure and competitive. I think we're going to see a lot of Inteleon and a very high win rate for Inteleon because the skill to how broken it is ratio, I mean, Leafeon's off the chart for like, it's pretty easy and it's broken. So is Inteleon. Liquidation is very easy to play and it's really broken. I do believe Snipe Shot is probably a little better as a moveset, but it is much harder to play Snipe Shot Fellstinger. That takes a lot of skill actually, but Acrobatics Liquidation, you can easily go that into like any comp you want still. and that takes absolutely no skill, no brain power, and it's super broken. Inteleon has the best lane, not punishable at all, in my opinion, so far. Maybe we'll discover a way to punish Inteleon lane, but it has a secure from like 70% in the early game, which makes it just the best laner. Like, it is cancer to lane against this thing, so it's gonna win lane no matter what, which means it's gonna be fed throughout the game, and I believe it's the best ADC. It actually outperforms Cinder, in my opinion, in these fights, which is crazy. You just pop your Unite, you auto attack a lot, and you're gonna out DPS Cinder. Cinder's like the #1 ADC for like crazy output in fights if you can keep it alive. I think if you can keep the Inteleon alive, it's gonna have more DPS than Cinder's. This Pokemon is just crazy strong. It has insane amounts of DPS, insane secure, insane laning phase, and insane survivability, because Felsteiner actually gives you pseudo unstoppable is what we call it. So it doesn't stay unstoppable, but you can cancel a lot of stuns by Felsteiner. With Felsteiner, if you get Snorlax heavy slammed, if you Felsteiner the wall right as that happens, you'll still go to the wall, you'll become invisible, and you won't have been stunned. It's almost like Dodrio Drill Peck is a similar thing just like that, and that's just broken. So it's the best ADC at staying alive, best ADC at outputting damage, and it has the best laning phase even outside of ADCs. So that's why this Pokemon is so broken. Zacian, some people might think it's rated too highly if you're a competitive player. Casuals probably think it might be rated too lowly. The unique problem with Zacian is, I believe if Zacian could have 50 points whenever throughout the game, no issues with points, it would be probably the best Pokemon. It would probably be like up in this tier maybe. The problem is it actually really struggles to get points a lot throughout the game, especially if the rest of your team is losing, and if not a lot of fights are happening, you actually struggle a lot to get points. And Zacian without points is not that strong. You really need that passive to build those like boosted autos and like boosted attacks. Like, those are really strong on Zacian, but that's the unique problem with Zacian. And because he needs points so bad, you're actually not scoring a lot with him, which, I mean, winning the game is scoring, so point leads matter a lot in competitive. He feels very strong as a Pokemon when you have points, but again, you're not scoring, so sometimes you could have bigger leads than you actually do because Zacian just doesn't want to score. Sometimes he just struggles to get points, and that's the biggest problem with him right now in competitive. Still very strong though, and there's still ways to get points. It's just sometimes like Zacian can't even take a fight because you have 0 points. You can't take a fight. You just have to go farm while your team needs to fight. So there's some awkward situations you get to. Dodrio. So Dodrio, no buffs or nerfs, just very strong overall pick. I think Dodrio is probably the best speedster into hard to kill ADCs. Actually, it's probably Leafeon, but it's more like ADCs that are gonna have a pocket like Blissey. Leafeon, you go in, you try to kill the mage backline carry, ADC carry, if it's like an Inteleon or a Venusaur, and you pop your Unite and say they get Blissey ulted. Well, now you're not killing them. That was your whole combo, and you can't really do anything else. Dodrio, on the other hand, he can probably kill them like 1v2 if it's a really good Dodrio player. Dodrio's like the best speedster into like supports that are trying to pocket these like ranged carries. He's always been the best at that, the best at killing like any squishy mons really. Zoric's the best at killing these squishy mons actually with the support. So Dodrio doesn't need a support. Zoric, you need to play with like Blissey or Comfy, otherwise he's like Omega ass. He really needs like a support helping him, which I like the difference between these speedsters. Probably wasn't intentional between the Unite Des, but it really gives them a lot of depth of like what speedsters you want to pick and when. So very unique. Zoric, he used to be like almost a first pick in NA regionals meta. Now he's more of a last pick counter pick. You want to pick him on like the 4th or 5th pick once the enemy team comp has already drafted a comp that's bad into Zora. There's a lot of counters into Zora, and they did nerf him, so he's not as strong now, so you can only play him in comps that are good for Zora. If they draft like Tree, Buzzwole, A9, etc., you don't want to play Zoro. They all kind of just destroy him, and he can't really get any kills. But they draft like really squishy mons, easy to kill, and you can draft like a Blissey or Comfy to pair with him. Like, he's gonna just absolutely 1v9 steamroll the game. He's more of a last pick counter pick now. So Venusaur, this is probably one of the most surprising placements. So there's a running joke that we lost to TTV in grand finals. They played a lot of Venusaur, and that's why he jumped the rankings. But we actually realized Venusaur was broken before, like we lost to TTV. Like we played Venusaur a lot in grand finals as well. We didn't high prio it, but we knew it was really strong. And honestly, in my rankings before, I put Venu so low because I didn't know how viable Beam would be in the meta, because people just tried it in scrims and they realized, hey, this is like hella broken actually. And it kind of just popped up randomly in scrims a couple weeks before. Maybe some teams knew about it before, but we never really experimented with Beam. And honestly, I think it was kind of asked in the metas before. It's like really shining in this meta and regionals meta. A lot of comps that are built to counter speedsters now, because teams will draft like hard like speedster counters like A9, Buzzwole, and other stuff that just stuns a lot. People realize that these poke champs, and Venusaur is actually the best poke champ. That's why he's so far up. He's the best Pokemon, like long range Pokemon that outranges like Delphox, Mew, and other like A9 stuff like that. And he'll just destroy these comps. That's why he's so far up. And the comps that Beam is bad into, you just go Petal Dance. So they go a lot of things that Beam can't really kill. You just go Petal Dance, and Petal Dance is really hard to kill. Not only does he beat everything, you can flex him so he can't be countered. And so I think you're gonna see Venusaur in almost every single game in Worlds, at least by the winning teams. You're gonna see a lot of Venusaur on the winning teams because they probably know the tech. I just think it's extremely broken. Worlds is very soon, so I'm excited, but look for the Venusaur because I'm telling you, teams will pick it a lot. Blissey, like we always knew it was really good. I always had it highly rated in my tier list, and people would be like, why is Blissey so highly rated? Now you know, like in regionals, we beat TT in winners finals, we get to grand finals, and they figured out how to counter us. They banned my Blissey away from me. They counterpicked my Blissey. Like they either first picked it or banned it. It became a first pick or ban Pokemon, which is crazy to me because, I mean, don't get me wrong, Blissey is really strong, and the thing that's strong with Blissey is it enables a lot of Pokemon. For example, it enables Zoroark to be the best Pokemon in the game, when otherwise Zoroark wouldn't be that good without Blissey. The same can be said for Worlds. When we won Worlds last year, we 3-0'd Nouns with Cinder Blissey. And I mean, every team was running Blissey, but Cinder is literally, like, I like to call it half a Pokemon. Cinder is like half a Pokemon. You pair it with Blissey, and it becomes the best Pokemon combo in the game. I still think it's pretty strong, probably not the best anymore, but back then, I think it beat anything 2v2. Like even 2v5 you could win with Blissey Cinder. That's how strong it was. But Cinder without Blissey was nothing. And it's the same with a lot of like comps or Pokemon, because Blissey's a support that heals a lot, but you can play it as a defender, which is very unique. No other support can do that besides Umbreon. Umbreon can do that now. So that's why Umbreon is so strong as well. It's above Blissey. Before Umbreon came out, no other like support was tanky enough to be played as like a defender role in bot lane, also able to heal the team. Blissey ult is the best ult in the game. It enables carries so well. So that's why you see Blissey so highly rated here above other supports. It's not a support, it's a hybrid tank. Just like the flexible and like the amount of comps that Blissey enables. I'm not sure about other regions, but I've watched a bit of Japan and stuff, and they do pick Blissey a lot. Not like high prio, but you'll see like high prio of Blissey, I think, in probably NA teams. Not sure if EU teams will do it, we'll see. It enables a lot of comps that NA teams might want to run, that if you don't run Blissey with, they don't work at all. So that's what Blissey does. It enables Pokemon. Hoopa's kind of the same thing, where it enables certain plays that couldn't be done, but it's more with macro, because again, you win the game with points, and Hoopa provides so much movement to comps that normally don't have a lot of movement on their team, which really helps counteract like speedsters and other stuff. So you're gonna see Hoopa banned a lot, you're gonna see Hoopa picked a lot. At Worlds, it's the best support at what it does, which is like moving around the map and just like outplaying the team macro wise. And in a game that's all about points, it's really important. That's S+ tier. So now going to broken as fuck tier. A9 didn't get any buffs for nerfs, but it really shines in this meta, again, because there's 3 speedsters that are really strong. A9's also really good into Zacian. It pairs really well with Umbreon and Slowbro. It pairs really well with both. It's probably one of the best attackers into Lapras. It's just really good in the meta right now. That's why it's gone up so much. It also has a strong laning phase, which again, Inteleon has such a strong laning phase. You really need attackers that can lane well, which is only really A9 and Mew. The 4 attackers, I think, I mean, there's probably 5, but the 5 attackers you'll see for the most part in Worlds is Inteleon, A9, Mew, Venu, and Delphox. I personally think Venu attacker is troll. There's some comps you might be forced to run it, but Solar Beam especially does not feel impactful at all when you play it in bot lane. It needs to be like jungle or even top lane. But bot lane just gets rolled too hard, especially if they have an Inteleon. When you have Venu, it's just not strong enough in bot lane. But Delphox, you'll probably see in Mew and A9 and Inteleon. I think you'll probably see Venus in bot lane, but I don't think they'll win much. Glaceon is unique because it doesn't really fit the meta right now. It's very strong, but it just doesn't fit fit the meta. Like there's probably some picks that do what you might want in a comp better. Like if you need to counter speedsters, Glaceon's not that good into speedsters. It's also not that good as a DPS carry. It's just like, it's a strong Pokemon, like really strong. It's just, there's also so many other broken Pokemon that like, I think if this was a different meta, Glaceon could be like top 5 Pokemon in the game. However, in this meta, Inteleon just kind of does like what Glaceon does, what better. Currently, like Inteleon has a better lane. Liquidation is basically Icicle Spear, which is bad. Like once they nerf Inteleon, you'll probably see a lot more Glaceon, but Inteleon's basically a better version of Glaceon. I do think there's some things that Glaceon accomplishes that Inteleon doesn't. I think Icy Spear is so broken, but like again, Inteleon just fills that role so well. So you don't really see a lot of Glaceons get to shine. I do think it's really strong. So when you do see Glaceon, it'll probably win because teams will be like, hey, this is a good Glaceon game, and it might have a high win rate, we'll see, but it's probably mostly Icy win. I do think Icy Spear, if you can find a good game for Icy Spear, which is rare in this meta. Mew, no buffs or nerfs. This is one of the strongest Pokemon in regionals. I do think it's fallen off a little bit because of Inteleon, but it's still extremely strong, very, very good, and just solid overall in the bot lane. Maybe I should have it above Glaceon, but I really do think Glaceon's like a very strong Pokemon, just not in this meta. So you are gonna see a lot of Mew, like a lot more Mew at Worlds, but that's just because of the meta. I do think Mew is worse than Glaceon, like in a vacuum, if it wasn't like draft and stuff, which is why I have it lower. But again, Mew, the most versatile attacker. It can poke, it can DPS, it can get away. It has the most mobility out of any attacker. So it does everything well, which is like insane. Being able to choose between 6 different moves at any time in the game is crazy. It's just a broken mechanic, and unless they really gut Mew, it's always going to be broken. Lucario. So Luca got a massive buff, and I think it's so good now. You're going to see a lot of Luca. E-speed is like okay-ish. There's some games you could run E-speed, but pub close combat is the main thing that you're going to see. The ult is actually so good now. It's Luca ult. Oh, I wish they did this buff to Luca earlier. It actually feels so nice that Luca ult's actually impactful. It feels like how it should have been on release. Obviously, Luca would have been insanely broken if it also had this ult on release, but man, they should have made this change a while ago. I'm really glad they did. Luca's looking extremely strong. Very solid pick in the top lane. I recommend you pick it up. I'm sure there's a lot of people who already have a lot of games on Luca because it was good before, and pick it back up. We're gonna go over the solo queue tier list later, but I think it's really good in solo queue as well. So I'm really glad Luca's back in the meta, one of my favorite Pokemon. This is blue Urshifu if you don't know like the poses. I have red Urshifu all the way down in this tier. We'll go over that later. But blue Urshifu, I actually hate blue Urshifu online because when you're playing on like 80 to 100 pain, it's complete garbage, really ass. But keep in mind, Worlds is going to be 0 pain, and blue Urshifu on 0 pain, it really shines. It's impossible to beat this thing 1v1. It's just really, really good. They didn't buff or nerf it at all in the patch list. I do have Urshifu falling down a bit, and that's because Shedinja came out. I really do think Shedinja like destroys red Urshifu, like makes it unplayable for him. Not only that, like there's just a lot of carries in the meta now that red Urshifu can't really kill, like Zacian, Lapras. I mean, Umbreon, Mean Look, like kind of fucks Urshifu too. It's just not a very good meta for Urshifu. I think I overrated Urshifu in my tier list in the past as well. He's very, very strong, which is why he's up here, but he's kind of only good into certain comps. Buzzwole is so strong, I'm telling you. It's so strong. Sometimes it looks like the best Pokemon in the game, and I think you're going to see a lot of Buzzwole at Worlds. It's so strong. It has the best laning phase out of any top laner. It has no counters, and it's strong throughout the entire game. It just destroys everyone throughout the entire game. On top of like the best top lane early game, Buzzwole is just him. Obviously, there's some games you might want a different top laner that does a little better, so you won't see Buzzwole every game, but every game you see Buzzwole, he's gonna look broken, I'm telling you. This Mon is so good. Comfy, it's gonna be very strong on 0 pain land. I think that's where Comfy really shines. It really shines with the speedsters. Again, you only want to pick Comfy with speedsters. Otherwise, like don't pick it with range carries, with tanks. Only with speedsters does it shine, because what Comfy does is it can play with the speedsters. So the speedsters go invade the enemy side, harass them. The Comfy can be with them the whole time without dying, without any worries. That's the problem with these supports like Blissey and Eldegoss. They can't really do that. Hoopa can do that, which is why Hoopa's actually above here, because Hoopa can also play on their side, get out with the hyperspace hole, teleport back to base if needed. But Comfy is actually safer than Hoopa. The thing with Hoopa is you can play it with any team comp and do that. Comfy can only be played with speedsters, so you're only going to see it with with like these counter pick speedsters into certain drops. Eldegoss is like extremely broken as a support. The problem is like these other supports just fulfill other roles that some team comps might want that are broken. However, Eldegoss just mainly like as a support, fulfilling like the characteristic classic support role. Eldegoss is the best at it. It feels extremely strong as a support too. Just very solid overall. Tree and Snorlax, the amount of times I've 1v1 killed like carries as like Tree or Snorlax because I'm the defender of Luminosity is insane. Like these defenders are way overtuned. I feel like my stats are so good as a defender. I 1v1 carries sometimes in fights, and like that should not be allowed. Obviously these Pokemon are very good at what they do. Tree is the hardest Pokemon to kill in the game, and its stuns last for so long. Snorlax is really good early game, the best defender early game probably. Its Unite move is so good as well. Just solid overall. They haven't had much changes recently. So next I have the next tier, good counter picks. As the tiers go along, I'm just going to talk less and less about each individual Pokemon. I just kind of wanted to talk about the top Pokemon in the meta right now, give my reasoning for them being there. Good counter picks, Sylveon. So if you didn't know, I actually post this tier list on Twitter every time, and it gets like almost 100k views, like more than my YouTube videos actually. But obviously YouTube makes money off views, Twitter doesn't, at least not that much money. I had a lot of confused comments like, what does Sylveon counter? So Sylveon Hyper Voice shreds tanks. You see a tanky comp like Blastoise, Lapras, Tree in that comp, and like just tanky all-rounders as well, like Urshi. Sylveon is gonna hard farm because the Hyper Voice shreds the special defense, and most of the attackers that you pair it with or like other things do special attack, like Inteleon, A9, Mew, Glaceon, etc. All these defenders do special attack too, besides Umbreon. Sylveon just shreds their special defense, so it's like a tank killer. It's one of the best tank killers actually. Mystical Fire will counter like certain mid-range matchups, sometimes long range too. You pick it not only for that, but to counter like certain macro early game stuff. What you can do on EVs is you can one buff. You'll see a lot of pros do this where they take a buff, they evolve as Leafeon, and they don't do their other buff. They run straight to like somewhere on the map at the start of the game, and it's very strong at a competitive high level. Sylveon can do the same thing, so it can match a Leafeon, it can match someone else that wants to level 4 gank, stuff like that. So that's what it means to be a counter pick. Azumarill. So Azu is very strong. I think it's very strong base stats wise. The issue is it just doesn't have a place in the meta right now, kind of like Glaceon. It gets destroyed by long range primarily. That's the main thing that counters it right now, is like you play like a Venusaur or Decidueye into Azu, and the Azu can't play the game. You're just gonna chunk him. He's too squishy is the issue, and he can't really get on them. Where Azu shines is in comps that don't have poke. If they go like speedsters or something, or like they don't go long range at all, that's where Azu will shine, in the mid-range melee matchups. For what Azu counters, Aqua Tail actually completely counters Lapras. A Lapras will never be able to kill an Aqua Tail Azu ever. So that's something good to keep in mind, because Laprases, a lot of them are going to play top lane. That is the counter matchup there that people are asking about. Red Urshifu. I really think I have Red Urshifu way too high. I'm not a fan of Red Urshifu. Like, yes, it has good secure, but Zacian has like 3 times better secure than it. The punch does like 2k damage. Zacian ult does like 6k damage. I just really think it's outshined by a lot of the meta Pokemon right now. Like Luca ult, probably better secure too. I'm not going to talk about it much. I don't like Red Urshifu much, but it's good into some matchups where you can just Red Urshifu ult someone and kill him. If you can get a Red Urshifu ult on one person, kill him. It's basically like a Slowbro Knight. It's pretty good, but I think a good Red Urshifu game is rare these days. I'm not a fan of the Pokemon. Cramorant. So Cramorant was banned, which is why you didn't see him the whole UCS season, but I think Cram is very strong. It has one of the strongest ults in the game. It has a lot of movement with dive. The issue is it gets hard countered by Leafeon right now, but Cram is very good actually into almost every Pokemon besides like Leafeon primarily. I think Leafeon absolutely destroys it. The other thing that destroys it is Venu ult, like Venu Solar Beam. You Venu Solar Beam the Cram ult, and the Cram's insta dead. That's why Cram doesn't have a good matchup in the meta right now. I think Venu and Leafeon just outshine it, but otherwise I think it's strong into almost every Pokemon, like 90% of Pokemon it's really good into. Garchomp just strong overall. Where Garchomp really shines is once you get level 11, you can Dragon Rush Dragon Claw in, and then you can Unite, and it's completely unstoppable. No one can cancel. You can get this combo off, no one can stop you except a Slowbro and a mean look Umbreon, and you just demolish these Pokemon that don't have a lot of like movement. Espeon's actually a good example, and it's right next to Garchomp, but Glaceon too, A9, like these Pokemon that don't have movement abilities to get away. So like Inteleon's gonna be fine, but there's actually a lot of like range carries that don't have a lot of movement, even Venusaur. Keep that in mind. Garchomp really good into comps like that. Espeon is just very strong overall still. Like the problem with Espeon has been for the past couple months, the issue is it gets fucked by speedsters and it gets fucked by long range, and that's basically what the meta is. Like mid-range doesn't really shine because assassins and long range are so strong. So like Azor, Dodrio, Leafeon, they're just gonna fuck the Espeon. Actually, Espeon has kind of a winning matchup into Leafeon, but not the other speedsters. And then a Venusaur or Decidueye is also gonna fuck an Espeon. So you can only really like last pick Espeon, but if you're last picking Espeon, there's probably better Pokemon for that role. Keep that in mind. I think Espeon's strong overall if you can find a game where there's no speedsters, no like things outranging it, and you can pick it like last. But that's gonna be very rare and competitive, especially for Worlds. Blastoise, strong overall, might have it a bit low. I'm just not a fan of Blastoise into a lot of the current meta Pokemon. I feel like it's outclassed nowadays and it requires too much farm to be good. It's still definitely a strong Pokemon and it still sees a lot of play. So we'll see if I'm wrong about Blastoise. I just don't think it's that strong. It's still like a strong Pokemon, but I just don't think it's all it's cracked up to be. But you're gonna see a lot of Blastoise still. A lot of teams like it. This is one of my personal predictions. I just think Blastoise is ass. Goodra. So the thing that Goodra struggles with the most, in my opinion, is no movement. So you can stay alive for a long time and it does a lot of damage, but Pokemon can just run away from you and you can't do anything about it. You have no movement. You can't really stun people for long. That's the awkward part about Goodra. It's just speedsters can permakite it. You can never chase them down. Like long range, like you're never gonna get on the long range. Even if you do once, most of them have like flash. They'll just flash away and you can't get on them again. And then you just die. If it was like uber tanky, maybe it would have a place in the meta. It'd be really broken then, but it's just not tanky enough, I think. Don't get me wrong, you can live for like 20-30 seconds on Goodra, but it's just not enough most of the time. Like you'd rather have another Pokemon in that role. Like Tree can basically do the same thing, and the difference with Tree is it can get on them. You can like Horn Leech into the enemy. Delphox actually fits like this tier where it's like counter pick. Delphox really good into like tanky Pokemon, really good into mid-rangers like Espeon or something. It's a really good counter pick for good Delphox games. Decidueye is the same thing. If you don't think you're gonna die on Decidueye, it's gonna be a really good Decidueye game where you're just perma like arrowing the team. I've moved up Decidueye a lot actually. People are gonna be happy about this because I used to have him way lower on these tiers. Next we have Copium Viable. So if you don't know what Copium is, it means you want it to be good, but like deep down you know it's not. You might make arguments for these Pokemon being good and why you should play them, but at the end of the day it's Copium. Like it's not actually, they're not actually good. Like there's probably a better Pokemon that fits the description. I have Machamp at number 1. I've actually moved up Machamp a lot of tiers. I see all the complaints about Machamp and I moved it up quite a bit. The base stats of the Pokemon are good, especially in this meta. Actually, I think it shines, which is why I moved it up. It shines a lot against a lot of the Pokemon in this meta. I still think there's better picks, bro. I mean, Copium, that you can play it, and sure, if you're really good at these Pokemon, I think you can make it work. You might win some games, but it's more off the enemy team not playing well and trolling than like on the actual Pokemon being good. There's probably still a better pick for the Pokemon. So Mime, you're probably gonna see me play Mime sometimes actually. You'll be like, hey, this is a good Mime game, but honestly, it's low-key Copium. Actually, we played a tournament yesterday and won against like TTV and ASU, and like there's been a big server recently called Redlock, and we played it, and I have 100% win rate on Mime in like 3 games yesterday, but I still think it's Copium viable. Like I have a lot of fun playing Mime though. We have EG, Wiggly, Zera got a buff. So Zera I used to have like as the worst Pokemon. So honestly, this is a huge boost for Zera. Zera's honestly gone up a few tiers. You'll see Candle here, which Candle was like the best Pokemon on the last patch. Now it's like really mid. I might still have it too high. I honestly think Candle is so ass now, like so ass, but we'll see. I mean, Copium viable, like you'll see some teams run it. Maybe it's not fully as I think. I have it here hoping that I'm wrong because I do like Candle. Scyther's another one where like I think TTV won a Scyther game against ASU that they should not have won, where Scyther, like Celestial stole the Rayquaza, and that's just like people will be like Scyther's broken after that. Like no, they're hard losing the whole game. There's Pokemon that will have a better secure than Scyther. It just happened to be Scyther that got it, but Scyther was also the reason they were losing the game. And you could play like Lucario at that point, which would have a better secure, and they probably wouldn't lose the game as hard. That's just how some games go. It's Copium viable. I do not think Scyther's good. Talongardy. Clefable is one of the Pokemon I think is so bad. You're gonna see a lot of Clefable at Worlds. I think it's such a bait. I do not think Clefable is good at all. It might have a low win rate, we'll see. I don't think Clefable is good. The only time Clefable is good is if your enemy team picks triple melee, which interestingly enough happens a lot in Asia. You might see some Asian teams like pick and ban it because they really like triple melee. Interesting meta over there. Can't wait to play against it actually in Worlds. I have this tier rarely picked, so this is a bit different from how I place Pokemon in my tiers before. So there's actually some Pokemon here that I think would be higher up just off like in a vacuum. The problem is I think there's a reason. They're just unique as a Pokemon. Like they need to do certain things in comps. For example, Mamoswine's really good at getting picks and like stunning the enemy and doing a lot of damage. It does a lot of damage and it's good as a defender that does a lot of damage. The thing is, you don't need a defender that does a lot of damage. Your carries will already do enough damage. They need a defender that can stay alive while like stunning a lot. And Mamoswine just isn't that. Like Mamoswine cannot stay alive for a long time. It has no sustain at all. If you notice the top defenders up here, they have sustain. Slowbro has sustain. Lapras has healing with the boost autos. That's a lot of sustain. Also gives itself a shield. Blissey played as a defender, obviously lots of sustain. Tree and Snorlax, literally the most sustain in the game. Mamoswine's really lacking that as a defender. That's like the niche scenario that he fits, where like it just doesn't work as a defender, and he's also not good enough to be played as a carry, because sometimes defenders that are broken enough, you'll see them played as a carry, like Lapras. Mamo's just not good enough yet after the bus to warrant that. Playing over like Lapras, like do you really want a Mamo top instead of a Lapras top? It's not needed in the defender role what he does, which is why like in competitive he's just not good because of that. Like he'd have to be uber broken to be picked. It's just like the way the meta is right now, he's either going to be at the bottom or at the top. Like they either have to buff him to be the most broken Pokemon in the game to be picked because he does way too much damage, he one-shots everything, or he's just not going to be picked because I just don't think he fulfills the defender role well. And maybe they have to redesign his kit somehow, but that's just how it is. Dragonite, Sableye are like similar. Dragonite is really good at being able to fight, but also like being able to like rip objectives secure and like kind of tempo. Like he has really fast farming and you can tempo across the map. The problem is Leafeon and Lapras already do this, but better, even though they don't have secure. The problem is like the secure is not needed because there's so many good Pokemon that can team fight well that have good secure. He used to fit that category of like being able to fight and secure, which is really good, and be able to farm really fast. But the team comps work out where you have a really good secure, so you don't need that, and you have really good team fight on top of secure. So Dragonite's just not needed. And Pokemon that can tempo as fast as Dragonite, where they can just apply pressure across the map really fast, Leafeon and Lapras, they might not have secure, but the rest of the comp will have it, and they just do that better than Dragonite. So I think Dragonite like really strong in solo queue. You'll see on my solo queue tier list in a bit that these Pokemon have insanely broken base stats, and what they can do is really good in solo queue. It's not good in competitive. It's the same with Gengar and Greninja actually, where like they're reset mons. So reset mons, another thing that is like kind of the same, where it's either going to be the worst Pokemon in the game or the best Pokemon in the game. And Pokemon like this, I'd rather be the worst in competitive. Again, I think like Gengar is really strong in solo queue, so we'll get to that. The role they fulfill in competitive, they'd have to be really broken. They'd either be the #1 Pokemon or one of the worst Pokemon. That's just how it is with certain hits of like Pokemon, like what they can do. Sableye, same thing. It likes to like play around the map, go back cap, go stun, and it does work to a degree. Like we saw ASU run it a lot, but I just think the certain playstyle is not good enough. You'd rather have like a healing support on your team. The rest here, it doesn't really fall under the same category sometimes. Again, Cinder I think is outclassed by Inteleon, Dragapult. These ADCs I just think aren't good enough for competitive. They don't output enough DPS right now. And again, they're either going to be at the top or at the bottom. I think most of these Pokemon, you'll never see them in the middle. Maybe Scizor and Charizard and Greedent, like these are more balanced Pokemon that are just kind of bad right now. For these Pokemon, not really. Pikachu's a more balanced Pokemon too. Charizard's base stats actually feel broken right now. It's just his Unite move is so useless. Like I miss old Charizard Unite, to be honest. It was so good. I don't think it needed to change personally, but never pick. We have Gengar, Greninja. I always have people complaining about this tier, but it won't change for the most part unless they get massive buffs. The biggest change here is I've Crustle as the worst Pokemon in the game. I know all the Crustle fans are gonna be mad. There's some diehard Crustle fans. And I actually have Tyranitar down here, which is new. I think Tyranitar is just so bad, and I honestly should have put him down here sooner. It's kind of copium that I kept him in above tiers. But yeah, hope you guys enjoy the competitive tier list. now we can get into the solo queue tier list. The first thing you'll see here is Mewtwo doesn't have its own tier. I do think Mewtwo's a step above the rest, but I'm just gonna categorize it like normal, like S plus S, A, B. And we can just zoom out for this one. What I like to tell my MetaFi students, stuff like that, is in solo queue, I think there's 3 big things that make or break a Pokemon for how good they are, for the most part. 3 main rules you can go by. So number 1 is how good of a secure do they have? Because it's undeniable in solo queue, you're gonna have some of the worst teams sometimes. And you can still win the game. If you steal a Rayquaza, if you steal a Reggie, you can still win. So having a secure is really important for Lowe's games. Again, solo queue is not about how strong a Pokemon might be in one game. You need to think about, like, if you play 100 games, how consistently can you win? Sure, there's one game where you might play like Garchomp, which has no secure, and you steamroll the game. You're like level 15, you're killing everyone. But that's not gonna happen every game. It might look like the best Pokemon in that game, but across 100 games, you really need a secure for the games you're hard losing, where your randoms are ultra ass. These are the 3 main rules for consistency. Number 1 is secure. Number 2 is gonna be how fast you can farm. If we're talking about consistency, then you want to get your level up. Every level is a huge amount of stats, like base stats. So like being level 13, level 14 at the end of every game or at the Rayquaza fight is going to be a huge difference for how much impact you have on that fight, how hard you're winning the fight. So Pokemon that farm really slowly, my best example is Clefable. I have Clefable rated really lowly, like all the way down here, is because they cannot farm very fast. It has the worst farming speed in the game. Farming fast is so important for consistency in solo queue, because if you can't win the lane, which sometimes you can't, because say you're playing Clefable, you're playing into Mewtwo, your team doesn't have a Mewtwo, you're not going to win the lane no matter what you do, because Mewtwo is too broken. There's always going to be games you're behind. You can't be consistently ahead every game, and when you're behind, you need to be able to farm fast to get back into the game, to get levels and maybe win some fights and start to win the game. But it's going to be impossible on some Pokemon that farm slowly. So farming fast is the second most important thing for consistency. Rule number 3 is going to be how good they are at team fights. If a Pokemon has the first 2, my prime example is Talonflame. So it has really good secure with fly. It's really good at farming fast. And actually the second rule can be more like tempo as well. How good they are at tempoing, which if you don't know what tempoing is, it's basically how much of pressure you can apply across the map. So it's farming, like how good they are at cross maps. So for Lapras is like probably the prime example for being good at tempoing. When an objective spawns, you can actually play on the opposite side. You can score like 40 points. You can Lapras ult to the other side of the map really fast and be at the fight. So that's an example of tempo. Like you're applying pressure on opposite sides of the map in like 5 seconds. Talonflame is good at the first 2, but terrible at the third. Talon is not that good in team fights. It's really going to struggle because sometimes an all-out brawl is going to happen. Your whole team's going to try to fight. You're not going to win by backcapping the whole game. Like Rayquaza is really strong. If the enemy team gets Rayquaza, most likely they'll win if they're stomping the rest of your team. So you need to be able to win some team fights, be able to like 1v3, 1v like 5 even sometimes in team fights. Being good at team fights is extremely strong, and you'll see some Pokemon kind of not follow these 3 rules exactly, but it's because they're so good at something unique they do, which we'll get into. But these are the 3 rules I like to go by. So that's just what you should think when picking a Pokemon, and that's kind of how my tier list is structured. It's kind of like the other thing you need to think about is like how strong a Pokemon is, how like really broken they are compared to like their skill level, which I went over in the competitive tier list, but it's even more important in solo queue because there's some Pokemon that are so easy to play and strong. So those are going to be higher, which is why Mewtwo's number 1, because it's so strong, but more importantly, it's so easy to play. You don't aim any Mewtwo abilities except the teleport. All of its abilities are sure hit, point and click. It's so easy to play. Its ult is not even point and click. You hit the button. There's going to be some Pokemon that if you can master them, they could be like probably top of the list. But the problem is it's going to take like 1,000 games to be really good at these Pokemon. And that's just like, that's not how the tier list should be structured based off like skill alone, because a lot of the people watching this are probably not that good mechanically at the game, and that's okay. We're just playing it for fun. I do take that into account in the tier list as well. So yeah, let's get into it. I already went over Mewtwo, so we can just go to Zacian. Zacian it's actually harder to play, but I think for how good it is, the trade-off's worth it. So it's hard to play, but it's really, really strong if you learn it, and it's not not that hard to learn, and it fills all 3 categories that I went over perfectly. It's like the perfect Pokemon for all 3 of those categories. Maybe the second category, it's a bit iffy because sometimes you don't want to score, but that doesn't matter as much in solo queue. Lapras, the unique thing with Lapras, it doesn't fill out the category of being really good at secures. It doesn't have a good secure. However, it's really good at the second and third, and on top of that, it's really easy. So that's why even though it's lacking on one of the 3 categories, it's so good at what it does that it makes up for it. Inteleon. So Inteleon fills all 3 categories. Really broken. The only thing with Inteleon is you can die a lot more easily, especially into like a Leafeon or something like that, or a Mewtwo. I might have Inteleon rated a little high in solo queue, but I really think this Pokemon is so strong, so we'll see how the meta plays out. I think it's strong enough to warrant, even though you're gonna probably lose a lot of games like Mewtwo and like Pokemon that can kill you, but the games that Pokemon can't kill you, you're gonna be so strong. Comfey is the other unique one in this tier with Lapras, because it only fills, I think, one of the 3 categories, which is being really good at team fighting, and only if you're with like a really good Pokemon. The reason Comfey is in this tier is because it is the #1 Pokemon at the top for how easy it is to play. Comfey is like here for just playing it at like an okay level, and then the rest of the Pokemon are here for how easy it is. Even Mewtwo. You can play Comfey. If you have a Mewtwo on your team, you go on the Mewtwo the whole game. You just sit there and you click 2 buttons, and you'll probably win the game if the other team doesn't have Mewtwo. Comfey is just always going to be so strong when a new broken Pokemon comes out, which is Pokemon Unite, so that's gonna happen. So that's why Comfey's in this tier, because it's so easy to get wins on it. You don't even have to play the Pokemon well. Obviously in competitive, you're gonna have to master the Pokemon. Otherwise there's some matchups you're not gonna win unless you fully master the Pokemon. But in solo queue, it's different. You can just steamroll a game with the most broken Pokemon in the game, and I just think that's so broken for how easy it is. That's why like a player could pick up Pokemon Unite, and like on the second day or even the first day, all you do is you tell them, play Comfey and sit on me, sit on top of me the whole game. You lock in Mewtwo, and you will probably have like a 70-80% win rate if you're good at Mewtwo, maybe even higher, because you just tell them spam all the buttons on cooldown and you'll still win. And that's why Comfey is an S+ tier, because that's insane to me. You could win at like the highest elo masters doing that. Next we have S tier. Eldegoss is extremely broken in solo queue. It has really good secure. It has all 3 categories as a support, and I think its base stats are so broken. Very, very good. Umbreon doesn't really have that good of a secure. It has an okay secure, and it's not that good at farming. I just think its base stats are so broken. It's so broken in these team fights, so it's so good at the 3rd category, and that's why it warrants it being up this high. Slowbro is honestly good at all 3. Scald is such a good secure for no reason, just because of how tick damage works in this game. Insanely good at farming. Like honestly, it farms really fast, and like really good at team fights. A9 is good at all 3 categories. The main thing that A9 will struggle with though is getting like poked long range. There's a lot of Desies in solo queue, so that can happen to you a lot, so just be wary of that. So Tree honestly only suffers from farming fast. It does not farm very fast, but it's good at the other 2 categories, and it's so good in team fights, especially in solo queue. People do not know how to play around a tree. They'll just run at the tree and try to kill the tree, and if they do that, like the tree will live for like 30 seconds even if you're trying to kill it, and then the rest of the team on like Tree's team will kill you. So that's why Tree is so good. It's better if you just run past the tree, because you're not going to kill it and kill the rest of the team, but people won't do that in solo queue. They'll try to kill the tree, and that's probably how it will always be for a while. So Dodrio is a bit different. It's the first Pokemon that's like actually hard besides like Zacian, but Dodrio is much harder than Zacian in my opinion. Zacian's probably like mid-tier level of hard for learning, and Dodrio is like one of the hardest Pokemon in the game to learn, if not the hardest Pokemon. The issue is like you don't even have to be that good at Dodrio to be able to win games on it, just because of how broken it is at the second one, tempo. Just being able to run across the map scoring. It's so good in team fights. It's just so good in all 3 categories. Leafeon is kind of the same as Dodrio. The theme with Leafeon is it's so easy to play. The theme with Leafeon though is I do think it's not that good in team fights. That's why it's under Dodrio. So even for how insanely easy Leafeon is, you might struggle to win games. Also because its secure is like actually like not that good if you're going Razor Leaf. Solar Blade on the other hand, very good secure, but I don't think Solar Blade is that good. I might have Leafeon rated a little lowly, we'll see. I feel like Leafeon is so easy for pros to pick up, but maybe for the casual gamer, Leafeon's still a bit hard to learn. It's weird because I feel like Leafeon's win rate should be higher than it is. You can just check win rates if you go to uniteapi.dev, and they show you the win rates of the top 10,000 players in the game. And I do think Leafeon should be way higher win rate than it is. Its win rate is not that high, so that one confuses me. Maybe people are just still learning it. Eventually the casuals will learn it to a point where it's a high win rate consistently. Blissey. So Blissey is a unique one because you might think that it doesn't fit all 3 categories if you're not a Blissey player. Blissey players will know that it fits all 3 categories. You go soft-boiled egg bomb, you have like 5 eggs. You actually farm very fast. Its team fights are insanely good. You're keeping your team full health the whole team fight, and Blissey is the best ult in the game. It just actually fits all 3 categories well. For secure, its Unite move is one of the best secures in the game. I remember for last year, because Blissey was the only defender you play, it wasn't drafted as blind pick. I played only Blissey in solo queue to prepare for regionals and worlds on my like Smurf account, and I had like 70% plus win rate in solo queue, which is insane. I play like a carry Pokemon like Decidueye or something, I had like a 68% win rate. Blissey actually fits all 3 categories, surprisingly enough. Zoric is unique in where it's really shit if your team didn't go a healer, but you're gonna get a lot of like Eldegosses and stuff on your team. If you're a really good Zoric, some of the randoms will tend to pocket you as Zoric, and then it's really good. But if you don't get like a pocket on your team at all, Zoric does not feel that strong, which is why it's lower here. But it fits all 3 categories really well. The problem with Zoric is it just doesn't have sustain. So if it doesn't have sustain in the team fights, it's gonna die really fast and it's not gonna be very impactful. If like an Eldegoss unites, like a random Eldegoss will unite the Zoric, then you can 1v5 the team fight. But if you get no healing whatsoever, no help whatsoever, like Zoric's not gonna do much in the team fight. It's a 50-50 every game whether you're gonna get that or not. Venusaur, just very strong overall. Fits all 3 categories pretty well actually. It's just strong overall. The problem with Venusaur, it doesn't have much movement if you go beam, and if you go petal dance, its secure is not that good. The problem in competitive is like you can cover up, so if you go petal dance, you can go like Zacian or something, and now you have really good secure on your team, so you don't need a really good secure. In solo queue, you can't do that. Like if you pick and choose your build, you're gonna lack secure, or you're gonna lack like being able to tempo very well, so that's why it's lower here. The fact that you can choose between movesets, really good in competitive, not as good in solo queue. Hoopa. So only thing that Hoopa really lacks is a good secure, but its secure is honestly like pretty decent. It's really good in team fights if your team knows how to play around it, which tends to be more high elo masters. In lower, like in great veteran expert, I don't recommend playing Hoopa because people will not know to take the portals. You'll place a portal next to like someone 1 HP and they won't take it. Lucario, I think, is very strong. All these Pokemon are just very solid. They fit the 3 categories I mentioned like fairly well. Glaceon doesn't have a good secure, but I feel like most of the tiers are self-explanatory from this point onward, so you guys can just look at the solo queue tier list. Let me know if you disagree with anything, but yeah, it's rated off again the 3 categories, the skill to how easy it is, because I think those are the most important things to rate off of. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you in the next one.